Everyone can accomplish great things. I've mentioned this before. I firmly believe everyone is built for greatness in life. And the way that you're going to get to greatness is through discipline. This episode's been long in the making. I've had this on my mind for quite some time, just to kind of share my thoughts about what my entire opinion on this topic is. I'm not going to say it yet, but we'll get into it. But the reason that I've been focusing on this is because there's been a lot of things in my life that I've had to be patient with. I've had to take a step back and just let things happen, right? A lot of that it's out of my control with health or other issues. And, the topic is endurance. What does it mean to endure? Because there's lots of different things, and I think it gets misconstrued a lot of times. Like, what does endurance mean to you? There's a few aspects of it. I looked up the definition of endurance because I was curious. It was like, what does Google say when you search this? What does it say? It says endurance in its broadest sense refers to the ability to withstand hardship or adversity over a long, prolonged period of time. It is the capacity to continue despite fatigue, stress, or other challenging circumstances. Endurance can be physical, psychological, or emotional, and often involves persisting in the face of obstacles, maintaining a steady effort, and demonstrating resilience and fortitude. So Google actually nailed it pretty well. I agree with a lot of what they said in their definition of it, but I've planned this podcast 3 times. I took a different approach that I'm kind of curious to see how it resonates with the listeners this time. But this entire episode is going to be me walking through questions about endurance and then sharing my opinion, sharing some feedback, some tips and tricks for enduring through difficult times. A lot of the people that, are on social media posting, they typically say like endurance results, or endurance often correlates with physical exercise or any physical pursuit like that. While that is true, endurance does play a pivotal role, I would say, in fitness and reaching those kind of goals. Like you have to be patient. You have to, like, if you want to lose weight, you have to realize it's going to be a journey. It's not going to happen overnight. And you're going to have to put in the work. You're going to have to focus your effort fully on that goal specifically. And there's a part of endurance that I don't think it's spoken about too often, and that's the psychological, emotional, and, that kind of part of it, right? What do you tell yourself when you're in a hard time? What do you do? How are you taking care of yourself mentally? Like, these are all questions I think a lot of people have when struggling with something difficult to manage in their lives. And that's natural. I don't want to shoot that down. Like, one thing I've learned about endurance and enduring difficult challenges is it's hard and it never gets easier. That's just life. But the thing is there's things that you can be doing to keep a broader perspective, to have a better mindset. And we'll walk through them. But the first question I want to bring up is, what does endurance mean to me personally? And I've mentioned it before, but this has been something that's been on my mind a lot. What does endurance mean to me, Brett? Like, when you think about enduring, what comes to mind? And for me, enduring is putting your best effort forward no matter what. And it sounds very high level, but it's true. If you want to endure something difficult, you have to focus on the end result or the end goal or the next day. If you're going through something mentally that's difficult or something emotionally, try and get to the next day. But enduring to me means going through difficult challenges while maintaining a positive attitude and trying to make the most of life no matter what your circumstances are. And I've kind of gotten into endurance sports a little bit. I'm training for a sub-3 marathon that I'll be running in February. And during my training, man, I've had to learn how to endure on a whole nother level. Today was another run, a long run. It's Saturday. And so typically on Saturdays, I have my longer runs. And I honestly wasn't looking forward to today because my coach texted me this week and goes, I want you to get out, go do 12 miles, but make sure that there's lots of hills. And so I'm like, okay, well, hills aren't hard to find in Utah. It's definitely, if you walk down the street, you're going up and down hills, right? And the fact that I had to run 12 miles with hills, like I was not looking forward to that. I was at a trade show this week and I would put on like 25,000 steps a day. It was insane. And my body is probably not recovered from that. And so I woke up this morning feeling pretty weak. And I knew I had this run I had to get done because I have a goal of running a sub-3 marathon. And unfortunately, it's like, you know what? I signed up for this. I'm going to put my best effort forward, like I mentioned in my definition of what endurance is. And I'm just going to go give it my all. I'm going to go try my best and come what may and love it. I'm going to enjoy the journey. So I get out on my run and it's a little bit colder. It's getting into to fall time, winter a little bit up here in Utah. Like I'll be driving to the gym and it's 25 degrees. But today I, layered up, got ready, put my shoes on, went to a new trail that had a lot of hills, and it was hard. Like when I first started my run, I was in kind of I wouldn't say sketchy part of town, but there was lots of homeless little tents, and I was running through construction zones. Eventually I found the trail I was supposed to be on, and that was fine. But the entire time my body was screaming at me like, you got to stop. You got to stop. But mentally, that's where endurance comes in. Because if you listen to your body, you're going to give up real quick. You're going to end your goals. You're going to not reach the things that you want to accomplish in your life. And you have to push past that. You have to focus on why you're doing it. You have to focus on the reasons that get you up and going, right? You don't want to live with the regret of, man, I could have done more. I could have just kept going a few more miles. Yeah, my body's tired, but oh man, I could have done it. That to me is a difficult part of endurance, is listening to your body and then saying, hey, can I keep going? If I can, I'm going to do it. So that's one thing that endurance means to me personally, is just that you have to keep going. You can't stop. And if you need a break, by all means, take it. Like if you're injured, do it. But if you can keep going, then that should be your focus. Focus on growth. Focus on improving. Focus on what you can be doing to take that next step in your life to reach that goal that you have. And it's going to take work. It's going to take effort and a lot of cognitive focus. But if you're able to do it, then imagine who you can become. Imagine who you can become if you can endure the hardships of life with a positive attitude, with a idea that, you know what, this is hard now, but I'll be able to reap the fruits of my labor in X amount of days or whatever that is. So the next question, when have I had to endure something in my life? I've shared a lot of stories on this podcast. I've talked a lot about running, so I didn't want to really bring that into it. It's like, yeah, this isn't a running podcast. This is about getting after it. But one thing that I've really had to endure in my life is over the past 3 years, I've struggled with a lot of health issues. I have a tumor in my pituitary gland that messes up my hormone production quite a bit. And I've mentioned it before, but I got down to where I was in, 135 pounds in weight, which was insane because I'm 6'3". And during that time, I had to go through testing with doctors. I had to focus on work more than I ever have because I had brain fog. You can imagine, like if you know what it's like to diet and at a certain level. So a picture of that times 50 is I couldn't hold food down. I couldn't really eat. I didn't have an appetite. And then because I wasn't producing testosterone or anything like that, my muscle mass just depleted. And so I was insanely fatigued. I had the worst brain fog that eventually led me to have a mental breakdown one day, and I almost rage quitted my job. I couldn't handle it anymore. I couldn't take the pressures of work. And so I quit my job. But during that mental, I would say, stage of my life where I just knew I had to keep testing. I had to go to these doctors that weren't giving me any answers, but at least I was making progress in that sense. And I just knew if I was able to just hold on and keep going, it would get better. And I'd be able to look back and say, okay, well, at least I learned these lessons. And I was blessed enough to learn a lot about endurance during that time. I would push through the day. And one thing that got me through the day is I would always tell myself, if I can just make it through this work day, I'm going to lay down in my bed for a little bit and listen to a podcast or just zone out. I can make it to that point. So that's one thing that I would say with, if you have any goals about enduring, or if you're going through any difficult challenge in your life, is can you make it to the next day? Can you make it to the next, whatever that is? Can you take another step? Can you go to another gym session? You might not want to eat that meal prep that you have because, man, pizza sounds really good right now. But if you have a goal to lose weight, can you eat that meal and forget about the pizza for a second? You have to ask yourself these questions because, like I said, you don't want to live with that regret of, I could have done better. I could have been someone else. You have to keep going. So what were the key factors that helped me endure during tough times? And this is something that I've been thinking about a lot. And I've identified probably 4 things that I really look to when I am struggling, either on a run, with something mental that's going on, with health issues like I mentioned. But these 4 things, and I'll talk about each of them. But humor, having some kind of coping strategy, optimism, and then having a support system. So those 4 things, I would say, are key factors that can help anybody during tough times. We'll start with humor. That's my favorite one. If you can make light of any situation that you're in, then by all means, you're going to excel. Like when I was 135 pounds, kind of a bad joke, but I'd always be like, man, I look like I just came out of a war camp. Like I am not in a healthy place, but I'd always make fun of myself. I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm the stick guy from Bug's Life. If you know what that movie is. I hope the listeners know what Bug's Life is. Holy cow. If I'm getting that old, that's scary. But I'd always try and make fun of myself a little bit, make light of the situation. Because when you do that, it puts you in a different frame of mind. You're not focused on the difficulty. You're focused more on, like, you know, trying to have a great life, trying to make the most of it, even during hard times. When I'm on a run and I'm struggling and, not to get too detailed, but like if snot's running down my nose because it's cold outside and I'm hacking and, my body's just aching, then I try and picture what I look like from like the people that I walk past. And I just always imagine I just look like this slob of a man who is just so persistent with reaching these goals that, like, I look kind of like a goofball, which is probably true. I'm sure I look like a goofball, but try and find humor to get you through difficult times. And another thing is coping strategies. What does that mean? So this is something that's going to be different for everybody, I would say. But for me, it's practicing mindfulness. Exercising is one of the best coping strategies I have. Journaling is another good one. So just getting your thoughts down on paper and writing out and then seeing where you're at. It always helps me. And just try and find things that work for you. So another coping strategy I had, like I just mentioned, was when I was going through all my health things, I would just listen to a podcast in my bed because I couldn't really watch movies. I had migraines. It was really bad. And so I would just listen to a podcast. And that was something that helped me through that situation and helped me cope with what I was dealing with at the time. So find out what those are for you and just implement them more into your life. Having optimism is a big factor, I would say, though, because a positive outlook enables people to expect good things to happen and view hardships as temporary and surmountable, like you'll get through them. Optimism is also linked with better stress management and helps with your coping strategies too. I mentioned this a couple podcasts ago, but there's this quote there was a study that was done over a 20-year period of time that identified these 40 people and just monitored their life habits. And the ones that were all successful, the only key factor that they had in their life was optimism. So it can get you far, and it can get you through difficult times of life, really. So anytime that you need to rely on optimism, I would say try and do it in your life. Rely on optimism. Be happy. Be grateful. Practice mindfulness. Do those things. Having a strong support system, though, I would argue is maybe one of the most important parts of endurance. I've mentioned many times on this podcast how one thing I love about running is the community that comes along with it. There's so many people who are better than me with running, but it doesn't matter when you get on like a race line because everyone has the same goal of finishing, and because of that, everyone's like, "Yeah, you're gonna do it." You're like, "Let's go kill it." And that person that might be telling me that could be 50 times better than me at running, but we're all in it together. And take the same frame of mindset and apply it to life. We're all in this life together. So who can you rely on? Who can you look to? Call them at any time and just reach out to them. Try and ask them like questions or anything like that. But finding a good support system. So that could be your family, your friends, people at work. If you're struggling at work, find a good support system there. It could be an online community. It doesn't matter what that looks like for anybody, but try and find people that you can rely on during hard times, because those are the people that you want in your foxhole. I'm watching Band of Brothers right now. It's one of my favorite shows. This is probably like the third or fourth time I've watched it. But my favorite thing about it is at the beginning, they all hate each other until they start realizing that the only way to get through war is to rely on each other and to support each other. And they're all in it together. Because of that, they all have the same goal of staying alive and getting home to their families. It's an amazing series, and I would say, like, if you haven't watched it, go check it out. It's not for the lighthearted, but it's probably my favorite show about leadership and, yeah, you could say a support system. So find people that you can rely on. Find a community you know you belong in. Because knowing that others care can be a powerful motivator for you. One of the reasons I hired a coach was for accountability. And I'll text her if like my knee's jacked up and she'll adjust my training, but she's in my corner. You know who else is in my corner? My wife. I can rely on her, my family. I have some friends at work that I really like. I have some friends outside of work that I really like. And I'll go talk to them if I'm struggling with anything. So find a good support system, because those are the people that can help you endure. How have my past challenges shaped the person that I am today? And this is an interesting question because I'm still growing, right? I'm only 26 years old. But in what ways have I grown or changed as a result of the experiences that I've gone through? It's a hard question. But what I've found is that challenges can be a powerful catalyst for personal growth and transformation. And I'm sure that you've faced that in your life. I'm sure that you've had times where you've gotten through a difficult challenge, whether it be like, studying for a test or just going through life, right? But think back about that. Like, what are the lessons that you learned through going through challenge, through enduring, through not giving up? You don't want to give up. That's the last thing that you want to do is give up. But obstacles, hardships often force people out of their comfort zones. And what that does is it compels them to develop a new set of skills or reevaluate their priorities. You understand who you are, so it helps develop character. But that's what I would say, because it changes based on whatever challenge you go through, but those things are what I would say really help shape me into who I am today, is no matter what, I know that I won't give up. Giving up is not an option for me. That's my character. So if I can get through whatever hardship I'm going through or facing, then I know that's who I am. And I've had times when I've had to reevaluate my priorities or step out of my comfort zone. And it's never easy. You want life to be comfortable, but things are going to come up no matter what. And it's just important to find ways that you can, grow in those times when you do step out of your comfort zone. What lessons can you be learning? How can you be applying, this challenge to your life? And when you get through it, what are you going to be doing differently? And who are you going to become? That's one thing about endurance that I do love, is no matter what, it's almost a mystery. Like, who am I going to become if I run a sub-3 marathon? Like, what else can I accomplish? It kind of starts that conversation in your head of, you know what, maybe I'm capable of doing more. If you get, you have a hard day at work and you still show up the next day with a positive attitude and like, hey, yesterday kind of sucked, but I'm here to show up, put my best foot forward and do the best I can. That shows a lot of character, and it's going to allow you to grow. Because the other option is you go home, you have a bad day at work, you complain about it, and that's all you focus on is the negativity about it. And so when you go to work the next day, you're still thinking about it, thinking about like, yeah, yesterday sucked, today's probably not going to be much different. And then you just fall into a loop. You fall into that cycle of negativity and just disappointment, really. Because then you start questioning your life and you're like, I hate my job. I hate my life, whatever it is, whatever story you tell yourself. And that's not, in my opinion, a good way to live. So if you're going through a hard time and you get through a difficult day, then the next day you should be like, okay, yesterday was hard, but I'm going to make it better today. Easier said than done. I understand that. I've also struggled with a lot of mental health issues recently. And sometimes the days are the same. They feel the same. They feel bleak. They feel gray. And it's almost like you're living the Groundhog Day. If you're struggling with mental health, I understand. But what's important is that you don't let that define who you are, and you try and keep going no matter what. And rely on that support system that you have. Use some of those coping strategies. Focus on optimism, and you'll be better. You'll find ways that you can feel better, live better, and just be better. You'll get through it eventually. And when you do, who are you going to become? I think that's an interesting thing to think about. So one thing that I think is top of mind, at least for me, is, what do I typically do when obstacles and challenges come up in my life? Do I confront them head on? Do I avoid them? Do I take time to strategize and then formulate a response based on that? But I was studying some of the top performers, so like Michael Jordan, Steve Jobs. But the one I want to talk about today is Elon Musk. And he's a big name in the media right now. Elon is all over the place. He just bought Twitter, all these things. But back in 2008, he was trying to start SpaceX. And if you don't know the story of SpaceX, it is maybe it's one of the best examples of enduring, because Elon Musk shot off 3 rockets before the 4th one worked. And every single one of those ended in a catastrophe. So they all blew up. And he got this email that was pretty much like, you know what? If we do this, our company's going under for the 4th test. If we do this, our company's going to go under. We're not going to be able to launch rockets into space and keep this program going. Let's take a step back and, reevaluate our strategy and our position. And Elon's like, no, we're going forth with the fourth test. Like, we're moving forward. But he focused on what he can control. And he rallied his team to analyze the failures and then learn from them. And his adaptability was evident in the way that his team iterated on the design and function of the rocket. So they just went to the drawing board for one potential final time. And we're like, okay, well, here's the lessons that we learned from the 3 launches that all failed. Let's make this one different. Here's what we're going to change. And so the 4th launch of Falcon 1 was the rocket in September of 2008 was successful. So it finally reached the orbit that they were hoping it would make. And I just love that story because all odds were stacked against him. He had every reason to quit and give up because 3, like, I'm not in the rocket industry, but I do know that they're expensive. And so 3 of those bad boys blowing up, that's dangerous. And he's like, you know what? The alternative is I go forth with the last test. I move forward. If it blows up, then, hey, I at least launched 4 rockets. That's pretty cool. So if this 4th one is a success, then by all means, we're onto something here. But he persevered. He learned from his mistakes. And he had that positive outlook. So all those 3 things. And I just love that story. So what can I learn from the way others have endured their challenges? I think going back to the story of Elon Musk, he learned from his mistakes. He inspired his team. So he was that support system for those people who were like, I don't know if this is going to work. He had a positive outlook and he just kept going. He endured. So what I would say to that is find some role models that you can look to. That might be your mom. She probably knows like 1 or 2 things about enduring hard times. Or if it is an athlete, like I always talk about Nick Bare. Nick Bare has shown me that you can train for difficult challenges and get through them. And so whenever I'm struggling on a run, I think about, the lessons that he teaches. And it's like, okay, well, I can keep going. So think about that. Like, are there people that you've been inspired by in the past that you can go and look and listen from their stories, right? Take some time to think about that. Another thing that I think is important when you're talking about endurance is, okay, well, how can I build resilience for future challenges? And it goes back to some of the coping strategies that I mentioned before, like have that be a part of your life. But there's 3 things in this topic that I wanted to go into, and that's you need to establish goals, you need to develop problem-solving skills, and then maintain perspective. So those are very important. Establishing goals is crucial for, I think, anything that you're trying to accomplish in your life, but you need to set realistic and achievable goals for yourself. Having clear goals can give you a sense of purpose and a direction to move forward, even when those obstacles arise. Like I mentioned, with the sub-3 marathon I'm training for in February, my goal is to hit it in February. But I know every single one of my training days isn't going to be great. It's not going to be a walk in the park. And I'm going to have to focus on that goal of, hey, I signed up for this and I'm going to do it. So I have to put my best foot forward every day. And that ties into developing problem-solving skills. So if I take the example of running, okay, well, if my knee hurts, then maybe I should take some time to foam roll my calf and my quad and all these other things. But when you're faced with a challenge, take a systematic approach to it. Like going back to mental health too, I am not one person to say or like, perk up and say, yeah, I'm going to go try a therapist. That sounds interesting to me. For me, it's like an ego thing I have to face every day. But I want to get better. And so I'm like, okay, yeah, I am talking to a therapist. Maybe I do need to go see a psychiatrist. Maybe I need to talk to someone who's gone through something similar to me. But finding out how you can, take a different approach to solving your problems and solving your challenges, I think it puts you in a better spot because then you're looking for ways to improve your life and get out of whatever situation that you're in. So it can improve your ability to cope with stress and hopefully reduce your anxiety about the future of the unknown. So be a problem solver. And the last thing on this topic is maintaining perspective. Realize that we have a whole entire life ahead of us. And so any tiny little challenge that comes up, it's going to pass eventually. But what I would say to that is, how do you want to be on the other side of the challenge? Do you want to be someone who was strong enough to endure and to find ways that they could improve their lives during their situation? Or do you want to be someone who gave up? So you need to maintain that perspective and realize that everything is temporary. Everything's finite. I know I've talked about a lot about running on this episode, but I think it's easy to relate to because everyone knows how difficult running is. You had to run the mile when you were a kid. You had to, maybe you wanted to lose a little bit of weight, and running's a good way to do that. So it's like, I think everyone's had an experience with running. But one thing that never gets easier for me is when I have to do workouts on the treadmill. Holy cow, it's just boring for me. Like, you're just stuck there and you're on this little, maybe it's an 8x4 rectangle, and you're just running for who knows how many miles. But one thing that I tell myself at those times is everything is finite. I'm going to get through this exercise. I'm going to get through this run, and then I'm going to go about my day. But I have that perspective that everything is going to come to an end. You can have that perspective with your life too. We're all going to die. And so who do you want to be when you're on your deathbed? Someone that people were inspired by, or having those regrets of I could have done better in my life. I could have had a better life. So just think about those things. Establishing goals, developing problem-solving skills, and then maintaining perspective. Another question: what role does mindset play in enduring hardships? David Goggins. That's all I'm going to say about that. I'm just kidding. But he is the master of mindset, I would say. His entire thing now is he wants to master his mental game. I've shared a story before on this podcast, but he was 315 pounds and he wanted to become a Navy SEAL, and he had to make some serious changes. And so he was out running all the time, studying all the time, eating so little food. And he just had that hardship of, going through that entire process of becoming a Navy SEAL. But his mindset was, I know I can do this. I can take another step, and I'm going to give it my all. I'm going to work as hard as I can to get there. But mindset is huge. Everything I've talked about today ties into mindset, because your body, like today with me on my run, will tell you at times, I can't do this. Sometimes you have to force it to. But if your mindset is weak and you don't have that discipline, then you're not going to be able to do it. So exercising discipline is crucial for any hardship that you go through, any goal that you're trying to accomplish. You have to be disciplined. Jocko is my favorite person that talks about discipline. He's the one that I attribute a lot of what I've learned about the topic to applying the principles to my life. And his entire thing is, everyone has discipline in them. They just have to make the decision. So mindset is the same thing. Everyone can accomplish great things. I've mentioned this before. I firmly believe everyone is built for greatness in life. And the way that you're going to get to greatness is through discipline, through focused effort, through being able to persist through difficult challenges and endure the process. You have to be patient. Jocko posted this clip the other day where he was talking about discipline, and he gave the example of going to the gym and then guitar. So he says, you're going to go to the gym one day and see 0 results. You'll go to the gym the next day and see 0 results. You'll look in the mirror and see the same person that you saw 2 days ago. But what are you going to be after 100 days going to the gym? And then he said the same thing about guitar. You can't do anything if you're on day one trying to learn how to play the guitar. Maybe you'll be able to learn a chord and just play that chord once. And Day 2, probably the same story, but day 100, he says, you can play any song and you'll be surprised. You'll be surprised at what can come into your life through focused effort and through discipline. If I can be remembered for anything in my life, I want to be remembered for someone who has discipline. I want to be that person that people can look to as an example of discipline. It might sound egotistic, but it's true. Like I'm almost prideful of my ability to be disciplined, to make decisions that align with my goals and help me become the person that I want to become. It takes time. I was never this focused on discipline. I've shared that I used to have terrible eating habits. I used to be kind of lazy. I'd play video games a lot. But I realized that that's not the life that I want. And if I wanted to have a healthy body, then I probably needed to make some adjustments to my food. If I wanted to learn and become better, like a better member of society, video games probably weren't for me. So I had to make conscious choices to help facilitate who I want to become. And that might look different for you. You might have certain goals that are completely opposite of what I'm trying to accomplish in my life, but you have to have the discipline to make those decisions. So when I'm out to eat with my friends, most of the time I get something like a salad. If I'm at dinner, anything like that, like I run the risk of getting made fun of. Like I mentioned I was at a trade show this week. Everyone's in Vegas. We're at like a super nice restaurant and everyone's getting just delicious looking food. Like I know if I ate that, I would eat the entire thing. The entire plate is like pizza and just looked so good. And I'm like, yeah, I'll get the chicken Cobb salad because that's probably the only thing I want to eat on this, and it aligns with my goals. That's what this story I'm telling myself. And so I know other people are like, you're in Vegas, man. Like, splurge a little bit. Like, live on the edge. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. But you have to be disciplined. And I don't want to have to, run extra on the treadmill to burn off that pizza that I ate. So I'm gonna stick to my diet. I'm gonna be disciplined enough to be like, hey, you know what? That's not what I want. What I want is to be healthy, and doesn't align with my goals at the time. Caveat here: it is important sometimes to take mental breaks from discipline, like go out to get ice cream with your family or anything like that. But I would just say practice it. Practice being disciplined. One other thing that I think is important to talk about when we discuss enduring is what does it mean to endure with grace or dignity? And how can I handle difficulties in a way that I look back on it with pride? So it's going to look different for everybody, but I think enduring with grace and dignity refers to how a person conducts themselves in the face of adversity. It's about facing challenges with composure, strength, almost a sense of calm, and don't succumb to despair or behaving in ways that compromise your own values. I found this quote from Julius Caesar. Dang it, I don't have it pulled up, but something along the lines of, you can always find men who are willing to die for a cause, but it's harder to find people who are willing to endure hardships with patience and perseverance. And I love what, going back to what I just mentioned, like, don't compromise your values. Don't do that. When despair and adversity and it feels like the weight of the world is on your shoulders, don't compromise who you are as a person. Because once you get through the challenge, you can look back and be like, hey, at least I didn't go back on my values. At least I didn't give up. At least I knew I could keep going, and I did. So think about that. What's one way that you can endure with grace and dignity? The last thing I want to mention in terms of a question is what is the difference between enduring and thriving? This kind of plays into each other a little bit, but in my opinion, when you endure for who knows how long, whatever challenge or difficulty or obstacle you're facing, once you get through that, that's when you thrive. because you realize that you can accomplish more. And so because of that, you're like trying to branch out, trying to, maybe push yourself a little bit more out of the comfort zone on a regular basis and see who you can become. Because to me, that's what thriving is. Thriving in life is never giving up and always trying to find ways to live life to the fullest, even when you're struggling, even when you're having a hard time, when obstacles are stacked against you and it feels like you can't keep going, but you get through it. That's when you're thriving. So enduring and thriving go hand in hand, in my opinion, because once you endure the process, you will thrive in the end. There's a lot of lessons to be learned about endurance. And by all means, I'm not an expert. Like I mentioned, I'm only 26 and I struggle with this all the time. I struggle with enduring. Everyone does. And if they tell you that they don't, then they're lying. Everyone has hard times. No matter who you are. I had this thought at the airport the other day. I was looking around and I could see young parents like trying to manage their kids. I could see, an old man who looked unbelievably tired. He was like falling asleep at the gate with a bagel in his hand. But everyone struggles. Everybody does. The thing is who are you going to be on the other side of that adversity? So take that, I guess, with a little bit of confidence is you're not the only one who's struggling. Look around. And if you ask people like, hey, how are you doing? And they say, I'm fine. Most of the time they're not. Most of the time there's something on their mind or there's something that they're going through. So what I would say to that is just be a good person. Treat them with love, with respect, with kindness, and it'll come tenfold to you. When you're going through a hard time, you'll see it. Going back to my struggles with mental health recently, I've had a lot of people I've been able to rely on. And that's been one thing that's been helping me keep going. And I have to say, I think it's because I treat people with kindness and respect and love. And because of that, like I'm able to rely on these people and they're helping me push through. They're helping me really focus on becoming who I want to become. And a lot of that is just enduring the process with patience. So there's a lot on this topic that, again, I'll probably do another episode about enduring, who knows when, but it's something I'm learning. It's something I'm trying to improve on. One thing I want to say before I end this episode is if you are going through something difficult right now, just find out how you can keep going. Figure out what steps that you can take to make it to the next day. And embrace those challenges with grace and dignity. Because when you get through them, you want to look back and say, at least I didn't give up on who I was. At least I know I have the character to keep going. That's what Getting After It's all about. That's what this podcast is all about. So keep going. Don't stop. Be that person for someone when they need it. And I promise you, your life will improve so much. I appreciate everyone listening to this episode of the podcast. If there's any topics that you want me to cover, always feel free to send me a DM. And like I said, if you're going through a hard time, keep going. Send me a DM if you need some support. But until next episode, everybody, keep getting after it.